Hello to you, I am Golda Lee Bruce, and we are on the red carpet of the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence ceremony here at the Napa campus in Port of Spain. One of the honorees this evening, Professor Carol Phillips, well-known novelist, essayist, playwright, Kittitian-born Carol Phillips. Mr. Phillips, Professor Phillips, welcome.
Thank you.
How did you feel when you first heard that you would receive this honor from the Ansa Foundation?
A lot of emotions went round in my mind and in my heart, but the dominant one, I think, was just feeling a sense of honor and humility that I'd been chosen.
And we're speaking with Miss Rhonda Mango. Her name is one that we hear almost on a daily basis here in Trinidad and Tobago because of the work that she's done. Miss Mango, you are one of the Ansacafe awardees this year in the field of public and civic contributions.
Well, I feel very humbled, about receiving such a prestigious award, for sure. And I just thank God for the many blessings that He has blessed me with, and just rejoice tonight to celebrate.
Professor Anselm Hennis from Barbados, who is a professor of medicine and also of epidemiology, and he is being honored for his pioneering work in the field. Professor, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
What was your first reaction when you heard that you had been nominated or that you would be receiving this honor from the Ansa Foundation?
I think when one is acknowledged for doing the work that you love and you're passionate about, it really gives you a significant lift.
It's really nice. It's really good to have been recognized, because so many people have really toiled in the vineyard and have never been recognized. And tonight I'm going to accept this honor on behalf of all those Trinidadians and Tobagonians who have toiled over the years and have never been recognized.
Charmaine Gardner is the chair of the OECS nominating committee, and this evening the OECS nominee, Professor Carol Phillips, is being awarded as one of the Ansa laureates. Welcome, Ms. Gardner.
Thank you. Not only am I proud, he's an excellent example of what a Caribbean laureate should be.
What do you look for specifically?
For somebody who contributes to society, that helps people, that actually does something to improve the people in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean in terms of their quality of life, their well-being, and just their ability to contribute themselves to society in the Caribbean.
Vivian Ann Gittins, who is also the publisher of the Barbados Nation newspaper.
And this year it was not that difficult. We felt very confident about Dr. Hennis, Professor Hennis. We were sure that he was an outstanding candidate, and we feel gratified to know that he has been selected.
And what are your thoughts on this program, the Ansacafe Awards, since 2005, seeking out Caribbean nationals who are pioneers in their field and honoring them? What are your thoughts from someone who is now part of that process?
When I was first approached, I marvel that a company will come forward and offer such an award. And I really feel kind of honored to be involved in the process. And it gives me great pleasure to look around my community to identify those people and to then work in terms of getting them being honored.
Most distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am Maria Superville Nielsen, Program Director of the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence, and I'm very pleased to have you here with us this evening as we recognize tangibly our 2013 Caribbean laureates. Mr. A. Norman Sabga is Chairman and Chief Executive of the Ansacafe Group, a position he has held since May 2000. His leadership has ensured the continued success of Ansacafe, founded in 1881. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. A. Norman Sabga.
His Excellency, Mr. Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, Patron of the awards and Chairman of the Ansa Foundation, Dr. Anthony N. Sabga and Mrs. Minerva Sabga. Most distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I have been given the upstanding role of welcoming you all here to the 6th Caribbean Awards for Excellence. It is indeed a pleasure to see so many of you present here tonight at an event which gives meaning to the pursuit of excellence. This award has grown in strength since it started in 2006 and continues to evolve into the extraordinary. Each year, our laureates present us with an intriguing and powerful combination of science, art, and compassion, which helps us as a Caribbean society to flourish. We all need to understand these are people who approach their lives and their environment in an adventurous manner and found creative ways to improve it for the benefit of all. We have so much to offer the world. Some of our greatest gifts have been our people, our laureates, and others right here in this room. Our Caribbean success continues to grow and take shape because of the people whose voices have been heard throughout the generations. Allow me to publicly thank and congratulate our laureates, Ms. Rhonda Mango, Professor Carol Phillips, Professor Anselm Hennis, and Professor Dave Chady, as they continue to forge new grounds in the best interest of our Caribbean people. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today, and I believe that we are on the right path. I thank you and wish you all an enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sabga. May I invite Dr. Sabga to join Mr. A. Norman Sabga on stage as we begin the presentations to the laureates. I happily present to you the 2013 laureate in Arts and Letters, Mr. Carol Phillips.
The Caribbean is a small geographic region, but it is an enormous idea which transcends geography, ethnicity, and nation. Much of the life of the Caribbean exists outside, thanks to the millions of emigrants to the metropole in the last century. Emigrants leave, but continue to repatriate the intellectual capital vital to the Caribbean's ideative space. This is especially true of Caribbean writing, which flowered with the first wave of immigrants to the UK in the 1950s and 60s. Among that first wave was Carol Phillips, who emigrated from St. Kitts Nevis in his mother's arms at the age of 3 months to the UK. Despite the odds against, growing up in a highly racialized society where immigrants were scapegoats, he was accepted to Oxford University, which changed his path but not his life. It would be 22 years before he could return to St. Kitts and Nevis. The return circuit would define his work and life.
It was a huge revelation because I suddenly realized there was this part of me that had been hidden away. Caribbean parents, migrants, whether they go to Canada or Britain or America, like other migrants, they tend not to talk about the country that they came from because they're very keen that their children should be a part of the new country. But for a young 22-year-old man who wanted to write and was grappling with issues of identity and belonging and home, discovering the Caribbean at 22 was a huge turning point in my life.
His first novel, The Final Passage, was published in 1985, and life as a Caribbean writer began. He made links with the University of the West Indies and traveled through the English, Dutch, Hispanophone, and French Caribbeans. His travels created a sensibility which many Caribbean people dream about, but have never experienced.
I often wonder if I had not grown up having to write place of birth, St. Kitts, West Indies, over and over and over again as a young kid, in England, if I'd have been a different type of person or a different type of writer.
So in terms of thinking of him as a Caribbean writer, I guess one of the important things to think is that the first generation of Caribbean writers really tried to write works, literary works, that would enable them to recognise each other. And that was very much tied up with a project of nation building.
Professor Phillips made his signature theme the sensibility of the transnational Caribbean person, rooted in the generation in between. The first generation of Caribbean people shaped in the crucible of empire, not entirely of England or the Caribbean, but poised between both.
The whole question of what my generation, the children of West Indian immigrants, what we were doing in England was pretty much a mystery to most people. We were regarded on the news and in the media as a problem. We were presented as a problem. And to some extent we were a problem, because it was a generation which was in deep conflict with the police, which were a generation who were not prepared to take some of the abuse and turn the other cheek in the way our parents did. It became clear to me that I wanted to try and write that story, to try to articulate why we were in England and who we were, and explicate myself, obviously, but also to try to, in a rather grand way, explicate a generation of people, either themselves or their parents had come from the Caribbean.
Much of his work is dedicated to traversing the borders between self and other. His book, Cambridge, imagines two protagonists, a white English woman and an enslaved African man in the 19th century West Indies.
In a work like Cambridge, he offers the potential for a white Victorian woman and an enslaved African man to recognise each other, more than that, to feel for each other.
He has been an extraordinarily prolific author, publishing 10 novels, one of which, A Distant Shore, won the Commonwealth Prize in 2004. He has published 4 works of non-fiction and edited 2 anthologies. He has also written for the stage and screen, including a screenplay for V.S. Naipaul's book, The Mystic Monsieur.
But he's really spread the Caribbean all over the world. He says about himself in something he wrote that he's a compulsive itinerant. And in his compulsive itinerancy, he really broadens our understanding of the Caribbean.
Perhaps his most significant achievement to the Caribbean was the Faber and Faber Caribbean Writers series, which he edited. This series brought books from all the Caribbean, Spanish, French, English, and Dutch, together in a single series in the late 1990s. This is representative of the global Caribbean sensibility his bilocality provided.
Carol Phillips is a friend of mine, and I think that he deserves to be a beneficiary of the legacy of those great Caribbean writers like Sam Selvon, George Lamin, and dare I say it, V.S. Naipaul.
For these reasons, for embodying the ideal of the transnational Caribbean person, for dedicating his career to the deeper understanding and the broad diffusion of Caribbean life, feeling, and potential, Professor Carol Phillips has been named the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence Laureate in Arts and Letters for 2013.
I would like to, first of all, extend my sincere thanks and my gratitude to all those involved in the Anthony Sabga Caribbean Awards. To Mr. Sabga, of course, himself, for the vision and the generosity of his initiative. To those many people on panels and committees throughout the Caribbean who took time out of their busy schedules to read, to discuss, and eventually to nominate individuals. And I'd also like to thank the people on the ground here in Trinidad who coordinated the whole initiative and made it possible for us all to come together this evening. I recognize the other laureates as being outstanding individuals in the fields of public and civic contributions in science and technology, and their exceptional achievements speak for themselves. It is, of course, fitting and appropriate that these areas should be singled out for special mention, as the Caribbean region needs to continue to develop and extend the idea that it's important to give back to the community, as well as enabling individuals to pursue their research in the cutting-edge world of science. I'm honored and humbled to be sharing a platform tonight with distinguished representatives from these worlds. But I stand before you as a writer, and some, of course, may wonder what practical use is literature in the world we live in today. How do the arts help us to pave roads, build schools and hospitals, maintain employment, extend our tourist infrastructures, or, in more general terms, how do the arts develop our economies and our societies in general? Clearly, the Anthony Sapga Awards, by choosing arts and letters as one of the 3 areas to be recognized, feel that the arts do have a vital function in a healthy society. And once again, I applaud them for their vision. From my own point of view, it seems absolutely crucial to me that all societies have some idea of who they are, what they look like, where they've come from, and how they've come into being. It's only an ignorant person who looks into the mirror and has no notion of who or what they're looking at. The arts, and literature in particular, tell us who we are as individuals and tell us who we are as communities. Once upon a time. It's an old adage, but a true one. If we don't know where we've come from, then we don't know where we are. And if we don't know where we are, we don't know where we're going. Once upon a time. In this modern world in which we live, literature serves, I believe, a particularly important and moral purpose. By engaging with language, one extends the capacity to think and express oneself clearly. By engaging with character, one shows a curiosity about lives which are not one's own. In other words, there's a demonstrable extension of empathy towards other human beings. In our world today, Facebook, Twitter, and a whole roster of other social media encourage a terrible, narcissistic navel-gazing and a real re-entrenchment to the kingdom of me, myself, and I. We need something which counterbalances this narrowing of our visions and this corruption of language. I believe that literature in particular and the arts in general serve this purpose. Finally, I would like to say how humbled I am to be recognized here in the Caribbean. I was born here, as were my parents, and all 4 of my grandparents. We're from the twin island state of St. Kitts and Nevis in the Eastern Caribbean. However, like so many Caribbean people and writers, I've lived a diasporan life, both in and out of the Caribbean. The cultural and the artistic life and health of the region has been a great concern of mine for some many, many years. It means an enormous amount to me that at least on this evening, my concerns also appear to be yours. Thank you.
It is with great pleasure that I present to you our 2013 laureate in public and civic contributions, Ms. Rhonda Mango.
Many people are called by God to serve. A few take holy orders. However, another small group heeds the call to serve and go out into the world to find new ways to fulfill that call. Rhonda Mango is one of this special group.
I was at home and I was reading and I had an experience of God in my life, and all I could say is that the Lord broke through my consciousness and really spoke to me in a very, very loud and powerful voice, saying to me not to be afraid, that for a long time He was calling me to respond, and I was apprehensive, but not to worry, don't be afraid, just I call you to love and to show the world how to love.
But showing the world how to love was a difficult business. To do it, Miss Mango had to spend some time preparing herself in unexpected ways.
I sold everything I owned and just started to search for this God that had captured my heart.
She started a prayer meeting, and slowly, a small group of people gathered around her.
After 6 months, I had met this sister from Rosary Convent, and she came out and she started to work out, but came to live in a community, in a house with me. I guess after a few years, we began a prayer meeting, and then we started to work with the poor right away. They had people up in the hills that got in touch with us. We were working with the poor. We started a prayer meeting that nobody came to for the first 2 years, but I was all right. We just did it, and all that was training for me. And I started to learn the Bible. I began a Bible course, and just started to spend my time doing that.
The community grew, and the prayer meeting grew. And in 1978, then Archbishop Anthony Panton invited her to move the meeting to his residence.
And we lived at the Archbishop House every Wednesday night for 21 years until the Archbishop died, till Archbishop Panton died. So the ministry of the community, the prayer meeting ministry and our ministry really began there in a big way. Lots of people started to come. We did Life in the Spirit seminars. More and more people would come, so it was public, it was open, it was in the Archbishop House, so it was sanctioned by the Archbishop, what we were doing and what our community was doing.
The particulars of the mission required her to make her way amongst those who were least loved, the poor, the suffering, the afflicted, to begin her ministry.
All that time we were working on the streets, we were working up in the hills, we were working in the hospitals, we were working with anybody who was poor.
By 1980, the community was sufficiently large and organized that it had acquired a name and a headquarters. Living Water, a covenant community within the Catholic Church on Frederick Street, Port of Spain, where it remains today. But what made Living Water unique was its constantly evolving nature.
When I first came to the community, it was a series of prayer groups, youth, men, women, Wednesday night prayer meeting, counseling and ministry on the street. It evolved to a community that started to embrace social needs in the society and very rapidly opened many social ministries. Duncan Street, the hospice for cancer patients, Marian House, the Drug Rehabilitation Center, Halfway House, Fountain of Hope, and all of these ministries really were reaching to very specific needs in the society.
When you meet Rhonda Mango, money is no longer important. What happens is you commit to the mission. And for us in Living Water community, we don't see it as a community, as Living Water, as a brand, as the corporate world will look at it. The idea is to help as many people as possible and give a lot of ourselves. So in giving in this community, we receive more. In fact, I myself, while I may have given, I think I've received more than having actually given. And so Rhonda for me is like my mentor. And I've journeyed with her, she has journeyed with me, and she's somebody I will support, I guess, to my last living breath. In the end, we are all inspired by her. Thousands of people. Some give their life dedicated totally to the community. Some give whatever talents they have.
Indeed, Miss Mango displayed leadership and entrepreneurial traits which are more closely associated with business. After helping the poor in Trinidad and Tobago, Living Water expanded outward.
I think that it's fair to say that she was the administrative hub around all of these ministries that were created. And it was her drive and passion, her actual, what I would call, she had a natural entrepreneurial spirit, a social entrepreneur, if you like, in which she had not only the ability as a leader to bring people around her who would be willing in turn to reach out and touch others. And certainly, I mean, she was a driving force behind everything that has happened within Living Water community in terms of their outreach to the poor and the socially displaced and the disadvantaged.
Ms. Mango has also expanded the reach of her message via the formation of the Trinity Communications Network, and she has also caused the community to evolve to a point where it can exist without her.
And so the community's evolution over a period of time is from a maximum leader who really was a visionary moving things forward to a collaborated style of ministry with many different leaders working together in a team that really makes the community happen.
She's a highly evolved soul, and really our world needs more people like Rhonda Mango.
For these reasons, Ms. Rhonda Mango, founder of the Living Water community in Trinidad and Tobago, has been named the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence Laureate in Public and Civic Contributions for 2013.
When the Lord broke through my consciousness some 38 years ago and set my life on a new and exciting path, I would not have dreamt in my wildest imagination where this new path would take me. And I certainly could not have dreamt that it would bring me to the point that I am tonight, receiving such a prestigious award as the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence. For this I stand here tonight humbled and grateful to Almighty God for his abundant grace and amazing faithfulness to me. I'm also grateful to those who were instrumental in my being recommended, the referees who wrote on my behalf, and those honorable ladies and gentlemen on the various selection committees of these awards for seeing it fit that I be one of the recipients for 2013 for my contribution to the public and civic sphere in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. For this, I truly thank you. Being one of 7 children and growing up in a family just after the Second World War, I learned the value of a simple life of sharing, caring. We had to share whatever we had and care for whoever needed care. We respected our elders, and we only spoke when we were spoken to. Daily family meals, weekly church services, and chores to keep the home going was the name of the game. No matter what our challenges were, and there were many, together we would aspire, and together we would achieve. For this grounding in my life, I am also eternally grateful for my mother and father, both of whom have passed on to their eternal reward, and to my beautiful, supportive, beloved sisters and brothers in my family, I give thanks daily to Almighty God. And so when the Lord entered my life that night and changed the course I had chosen to travel on, I guess unknown to me, much preparation had already gone into my new call. Over these years, it has been nothing short of an exciting and amazing journey of faith, graced by Almighty God and filled with sisters and brothers in a new family called the Living Water Community, and with an extended family with members amounting to thousands, coming from all areas of society, public, civic, and in some ways, this new family have all been part of a flow of life-giving water through this land, other regions in the Caribbean and beyond. This flow of living water has touched and healed, restored and made new, formed, educated and commissioned. gives sight to the blind, food to the hungry, clothes to the naked, homes to the homeless, visited the sick and those in prison, and set the captives free. This must be good news to the poor. For this, dear sisters and brothers, I am being honored tonight. On behalf of this Living Water family, I humbly accept this award. Striving for excellence per se has never consciously been part of my journey, but striving to become a holy woman of God has always been my agenda. On reflection, I realize that these two similar elements on the journey. For to become a holy man or woman of God, one has to be excellent in the way of love. The Master of love himself, Jesus Christ, showed us this by his life of love and his life of holiness. Be holy, he said in Matthew 5:48, or be perfect in another translation, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Isn't this excellence? Yes, the call to love and to be excellent in love is a call to all Christians, and certainly the call to our community. I would like to quote one of my favorite passages from Church in the Modern World, one of the documents of Vatican II Church Council. And I quote, "The joys and hopes, the grief and anguish of the men and women of our time, especially of those who are poor or afflicted in any way, are the joys and hopes, the grief and anguish of the followers of Christ as well." This quotation has inspired me and the mission of our community for the last 38 years. How can I say that I love God and not love my sister and brother, especially if they are in need? There are many needs in our community, as all organizations like ours know well. But we will utilize a purse from these awards in specific areas that would allow building a future for the communities in which we work. Today, our community has a mission in the town of Soufrière, a very beautiful area in the island of St. Lucia. However, this touristic town is plagued with many drug addicts, homelessness, adult and children illiteracy, and poverty that you would not like to see. In the face of such problems, what can a small community like ours do? In our weekly prayer meetings and meetings with children, there are over 100 kids present. It is at times like this that we experience our own poverty. But it's at times like this that we must excel in loving, excel in the mission of our community to love and to show the world how to love. We do this in a simple life, a life of sharing, caring, teaching, being a witness, being the best family we could be. Thanks be to God, a portion of the purse of this generous award will go towards ensuring stability of our family in Soufrière and assisting in the humane development of those we care for in the most needy Caribbean community. A portion of the purse from this award will also be utilized by our community for appropriate formation and education within the community to ensure the continuity of its mission of living water, enabling it to flow in the ways that God is asking us. For this opportunity, we are eternally grateful. There are many people who have journeyed with me through these years and have played a significant role in my life and in the life of our community, all of whom need special thanks and appreciation, but I know that this is not the time and place for that. However, I would like to mention our co-foundress, Rose Jackman, and give thanks to God for the gift of her in my life and in the life of our community. Thank you, Rose. In ending, I must also give thanks and my appreciation to my longtime friend, Dr. Anthony Sabgo. This prestigious Anthony N. Sabgo Caribbean Awards for Excellence is a testimony of his love and commitment to our beloved country and other Caribbean islands. For this, we are deeply grateful. Thank you, Dr. Sabga. Ladies and gentlemen of the awards committees, sisters and brothers of the Caribbean, I thank you. And I thank Almighty God for this honor afforded to me tonight, for I know it is all God's work. May He be glorified, and God bless you all.
It is with great pleasure that I present to you the 2013 Laureate, Joint in Science and Technology, Professor Anselm Hennis.
The problems faced by the Caribbean societies require bridges between theory and praxis, especially in critical areas like medicine. People who can create those bridges are rare, and institutions dedicated to research which directly impacts the public good by producing knowledge on chronic diseases are even less common. Professor Anselm Hennis of UWI's Cave Hill is such an individual, and the Chronic Disease Research Center, which he directs and helped to build, is such an institution. The CDRC existed before Professor Hennis, but his work has transformed it.
It is fair to say that he has, in a very short time, really carried the Chronic Disease Research Center forward to such an extent that I think it is fair to say it is probably the most significant and most highly respected unit of the University of the West Indies as it relates to chronic diseases and medical research in general. One of the major developments and programs that Professor Hennis has been involved in is the development of the Barbados National Registry. This is a chronic disease registry with sub-registries of heart disease, of cancers and stroke.
Chronic diseases have been recognized to be the greatest public health challenge of the region. The benefits of such a registry are immediately evident. The activities of the CDRC encompass cancer, eye disease, and diabetes.
He also was the senior author on the 5-year mortality follow-up, quite an alarming study which showed that if you had an amputation due to diabetes, if you had a major amputation, then you had a 50% chance of dying within 1 year. And so he was also the senior author on that. That was published in 2009.
As successful as the CDRC's activities have been, the route there was not easy.
When I first returned to Barbados and I started doing research, a lot of colleagues were confused. They thought that I was eccentric, I was not focused, and the questions were like, why don't I get with the program and do something sensible with my time? Not recognizing that research is a credible career to have, where one can make a difference by gaining information and making changes to improve the well-being of populations. That's what epidemiology is all about.
We are part of the broader Tropical Medicine Research Institute, which has a slightly overlapping set of skills, but again, that is another cluster. These kind of clusters are extremely important to do high quality medical research, because otherwise everyone is just working on their own. But I must emphasize that this is, I think, where Professor Hennis's contribution is most significant, is that he was the one who started this cluster.
In a relatively short time, from a situation in which in Barbados it was not possible and there were no opportunities for young doctors to have a career in research, we now have a situation where we can offer young physicians from the Caribbean a significant career path in research, particularly around chronic diseases.
Apart from the contributions to the academic institutions, the model of the CDRC has regional implications.
We work quite closely here with PAHO and WHO colleagues through the Ministry of Health, input and Professor Hassel's input. And so PAHO have also been quite interested in taking this maybe to other countries, or talking about it with other countries. And there have been other countries involved. The National Cancer Institute in the US, which is part of the National Institutes of Health, they came over last year to meet with us to specifically talk about a NCD, or non-communicable disease registry.
In addition to his research, Professor Hennis also participates fully in other areas of his expertise as a teacher and a clinician.
I first met Dr. Hennis in 1999 as a medical student on the wards of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And there he made a lasting impression on me. I never forgot our first meeting. He taught me the powers of observation and asking the right questions in order to get the appropriate response.
Nonetheless, his greatest achievement is to have proven beyond doubt that the solutions to the Caribbean's problems can be found right here at home.
In order to have effective policy, one really first of all needs to know and understand the extent of the problem. And then, after that, to then determine the impact of the policies put in place. So this whole issue of measurement by Professor Hennis with the Barbados National Registry being implemented by the Chronic Disease Research Center is a major initiative and has the potential to be implemented in other Caribbean countries, and therefore having an effect on policies in these countries.
For these reasons, for his work as a researcher, clinician and teacher, for having the foresight to devote himself to gathering knowledge before its value was recognized, and for creating an institution which can deliver the region from the new plague of chronic disease, Professor Anselm Hennis has been named the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence Laureate in Science and Technology for 2013.
It is with a deep sense of humility that I stand here before you this evening. I recall my days at Harrison College in Barbados, where my only opportunity to follow my dream of becoming a doctor hinged in winning a national scholarship. I was inspired by Henry Schuler's words, "Trust in God, believe in yourself, dare to dream." And these words are still as relevant to me today. Our little department at the Chronic Disease Research Center, CAFL campus of the Tropical Medicine Research Institute, the University of the West Indies, has been able to make meaningful contributions to our understanding of glaucoma, diabetes, particularly factors related to amputation, as well as pregnancy-related outcomes, cardiovascular disease, particularly stroke, prostate and breast cancer, lupus, and the role of inflammation in chronic disease. We have successfully established surveillance systems for monitoring the diseases that account for the majority of ill health and death in our adult population, namely stroke, heart attack, and cancer. This model for a disease registry is now being considered for replication in other countries. Our successes in research have all been achieved through collaboration, often with partners in large academic institutions in North America and the United Kingdom. We have indeed benefited significantly from these relationships, and I am a strong proponent of the benefits of collaboration and teamwork. Our scientific output has been published in many leading international journals, and I can say without contradiction that as a result of our efforts, Barbadians must surely rank among the most studied populations anywhere in the developing world. Our burden of the chronic diseases in the region, namely cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic respiratory illness, and cancer, is enormous and rising. the Caribbean heads of government met here in this city and drafted the Port of Spain Declaration in 2007, establishing strategic guidelines to tackle the NCD or non-communicable disease epidemic. The Caribbean also led the way in convening the United Nations high-level meeting on non-communicable diseases held in New York in 2011. As noted by the late Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable David Thompson, if left to chance, all the gains achieved in the Caribbean during the march from poverty to relative affluence since independence can be wiped out by the chronic non-communicable diseases. Our mandate at the CDRC has now expanded into the translation of research knowledge into practice and policy, and in this way, we hope to continue to impact Caribbean populations in even more meaningful ways. There are many who have helped me along my journey: my family, my teachers, my mentors, my colleagues and friends, and I owe a debt of gratitude to those who participate in our research and continue to do so. I am indeed humbled to be recognized for doing the work which is my passion, aiming to make a difference in the lives of citizens of the region. Dr. Anthony Ensabga must be congratulated for creating the Caribbean Awards for Excellence. The fact that he's done so is really not surprising, for it is clear that he is an innovator who thinks outside the proverbial box. I will use this opportunity to challenge Dr. Sabga and the leadership of Ansacafe to make their organization the regional leader in work site wellness programs, as a healthy workforce is a more productive workforce. I must congratulate the selection committee for recognizing the value of medical research to the region. It is my hope that our governments also utilize the evidence provided by medical research in the region to optimally inform policy and practice to the betterment of our people. In closing, I recognize that my contributions are never made in my strength. To God be the glory.
And our next laureate, the 2013 Laureate Joint in Science and Technology, Professor Dave Chady.
When we think of scientific research, we think of the large-scale technology, satellites, electronics, particle colliders. But there is another area of science, the small and the organic, which inquires into things like the science of mosquitoes. It is just in this area of scientific inquiry that UWI St. Augustine's Professor Dave Chady has made his mark. A parasitologist and entomologist, he has studied the biology, genetics, and disease-carrying potential of mosquitoes. His work has had a global impact and is sought by the International Panel on Climate Change, the World Health Organization, and many foreign institutions. This research started not in the academy, but in the field, in the Ministry of Health in Trinidad and Tobago.
I have to thank the Ministry of Health for the opportunity they gave me. So my work there was as entomologist, parasitologist at Insect Vector Control Division, where I ran the laboratory.
I do recall one year we had a rather steep rise in the early 2001, 2002, and it probably is the biggest rise in dengue disease in this country. And they fashioned our response, the vector control response, which was a national enormous response. And we managed that year, and so much so that the following years it dropped from 6,000 to about 3 and 4 and 500.
His pursuit of this knowledge has led him to places not ordinarily associated with scientific research.
We did another project on Uriah Butler Highway. We spent a couple years there looking at the highway as a potential barrier to mosquito movement, because these mosquitoes don't usually go very far. So we surveyed mosquitoes up and down the highway multiple times a year for 2 years, like I said, and then we did genotyping on them, and we looked to see, are the mosquitoes on the east side of the road genetically the same as the mosquitoes on the west side of the road. And what we found is there was evidence that they don't cross.
But the uses to which this simple-seeming research is put are not local.
the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a very selective process that tries to get the best scientists around the world in particular areas to do the assessment of climate change. Also, the acceptance by the World Health Organization as an international expert from whom they seek advice. The International Atomic Energy Agency as well, he has grants from there. He's also a collaborator with University of Alabama on work funded by the Bill and Linda Gates Foundation as well, which extends outside of Trinidad and Tobago into Southeast Asia as well.
This early work was a career in itself, but after 20 years, Professor Chedi moved into academia. At UWI St. Augustine, he made his presence felt as a researcher, teacher, and a collaborator with foreign institutions.
I was doing operational research for over 20 years. It was time to impart knowledge and teach a new generation of people who would become researchers in entomology or whatever field.
He made his presence felt immediately in the Life Sciences department as a researcher and a teacher. He won awards for his research and introduced new programs like the Masters in Public Health program in Trinidad in conjunction with the University of Alabama.
Professor Chedi is the most prolific author in the Department of Life Sciences, and this happens to be the largest department at the St. Augustine campus. In fact, he has quite a body of work that incorporates more than 200 published papers in journals.
For someone who's been here for a relatively short time, by all comparative standards, he has done outstandingly well. He's not this closeted, isolated scholar who is simply working quietly on his own and doing good work. He has broadened his reach.
The early work has become important in unexpected ways, as in climate change.
My research on climate change has really started with looking at rainfall, the effects of rainfall. And a lot of people were telling me, but you're doing climate-related research, and I never thought that was climate-related. And then finally, I realized that yes, this is climate variability. So I then started examining dengue and the impacts of the different seasons on dengue and dengue transmission.
But despite these prodigious achievements, there are still things that elude Professor Chedi.
My research is applied in most parts of the world, and the problem is that it's very seldom applied in Trinidad. It's really funny because I've also developed a strategy which will break transmission of dengue within a week of an outbreak and still not being implemented in Trinidad.
For his ability to undertake original research for the benefit of Caribbean people and to make that research available to the world, Professor Dave Chedi has been named the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence Laureate in Science and Technology for 2013.
It is wonderful to receive this award. It is a special moment, for it has been a journey of love. Now being rewarded for doing what you would have done for free. But at one time I did receive minimum wage. So this has been my approach to my work. Love what you do, don't just like it. V.S. Naipaul, in his book The Middle Passage, wrote about the Trinidad society in 1950s and 60s, and I quote, "The only professions were those of law and medicine. The most successful people were commission agents, bank managers, members of the distributive trade. Power was recognized, but dignity was allowed to no one. Every person of eminence was held to be crooked and contemptible. We lived in a society that denied itself heroes. On the island, talented persons were made to boil down and to be labeled snobs. It was a place where the recurring word of abuse was conceited. an expression of the resentment felt for anyone who possessed unusual skills. Generosity, admiration of unusual skills, equal for equal, was unknown, unquote. Thank you, Dr. Anthony Sabga and the Ansacafe Committee for helping to redress the imbalance observed and identified by Naipaul in the 1950s and 60s. Although many of my colleagues may appear to be snobs and arrogant, scientists are not snobs and are not conceited, and certainly not mad as portrayed in Hollywood and Bollywood, but are human beings with frailties, insecurities, and emotions as any other human being. But in the ivory tower environment, the individual idiosyncrasies may be exaggerated. And yes, many of them are nerds. And they've been nerds all their lives and will happily continue to be nerds. The individual pursuit in the various areas of interest brings joy and a career path for the researchers. What seems odd to many may be the subject of a lifelong career. Whether it is the mosquito, the coral reef, the roots of plants, or biochemical pathways. Interestingly, most scientists are funded by taxpayers. There is therefore an implicit responsibility to conduct research relevant to the needs of society. They should ensure that the results impact the welfare, the rights, and the treatment of the community, not forgetting the wider world and the wider society, future generations, and the biosphere, Mother Earth. It is therefore essential that the 5 Maternian principles be followed. The first is communalism, which holds that results of pure and applied research be considered as public knowledge with open access. The second is universalism. The democratic nature of scientific activity does not tolerate discrimination on the basis of gender, race, religion, social or academic standing. The third principle involves disinterestedness, which holds that the scientist should have no vested interest in the results of his scientific investigation. No family, no close friend to capitalize on the results, thereby avoiding bias. The fourth principle is originality. Scientists should contribute something new. New theories, new explanations. In other words, creativity is required among scientists. And the fifth principle is skepticism. This represents the counterbalance to the drive of originality. Adopting the Karl Popper approach, a 20th century scientist who wrote, and philosopher who wrote about science and society. And he advocated, and I quote, "All knowledge is provisional. So therefore, as new circumstances arise and new technologies are developed, the results may change. Therefore, nothing remains static. And as we go forward, we should have an open mind. Ego, conceit, arrogance, and hubris have no place. This approach will remove conceit and therefore lead to the recognition and admiration of equal for equal. Coincidentally, C of means communalism, U, universalism, D, disinterestedness, O, originality, and S, skepticism spells kudos, which is a Greek word for recognition as a result of one's achievement, which I suppose is why we are here today. On behalf of the community of pure and applied scientists, I wish to thank the Anthony Sabga and his Ansacafe committee for the award, and I hope we can begin to forge a new society with new principles and ideals. I sincerely thank you all.
Thank you, Laureate. Thank you, Dr. Sabga and Mr. A. Norman Sabga. These awards are not lifetime achievement awards. They are intended to support and spur greater excellence. It is essential that awardees have already demonstrated excellence. However, it is critical they have the potential to achieve even greater success in the future with the appropriate support and encouragement. On behalf of Dr. Anthony N. Sabga and the directors of the Ansacafe Foundation, and on my own behalf, I thank you all for joining us this evening to celebrate the achievements of these 4 remarkable Caribbean people. We at the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellence are honored to have enjoyed your company. What we hope you leave with this evening is a renewed sense that the Caribbean salvation is right here in the Caribbean.